In the quiet suburban streets of Dublin, California, a tragic event unfolded on the 7th of January 2009 that would shock the community and draw national attention. What began as a bitter custody dispute between estranged spouses evolved into a chilling act of violence that didn't just involve a family split. It involved murder, premeditation, and what prosecutors later called an operation with a disturbing code name, Operation Custody. This is the story of Eric Hill, his estranged wife Rosa Hill, and her mother, May Lee, and how their desperation and planning ended in the death of 91-year-old Selma Hill and the near-fatal attack on Eric himself. First, let's introduce the people at the heart of this story. Eric Hill, a father fighting for full custody of his daughter after separating from his wife. At the time of the crime, he and his daughter were living with his grandmother, Selma Hill. Participated in the crime alongside her daughter. Selma Hill was Eric's 91-year-old grandmother, who had been living in the Dublin home where Eric and his daughter stayed. She became the tragic victim. The custody battle for the Hills family's young daughter was at the center of the escalating tensions and ultimately turned deadly. At the heart of this crime was a custody dispute. Eric Hill had been awarded sole legal custody and primary physical custody, which is 85%, of the couple's young daughter, leaving Rosa with only limited visitation rights. That legal decision and Rosa's deep frustration with the outcome became a driving force in the events that followed. Prosecutors later revealed that Rosa and her mother had named their plan Operation Custody. They believed that by eliminating Sally Hill and framing Eric for her death, they could destabilize his position, regaining custody, and force him into legal trouble. This wasn't a spontaneous conflict. Evidence gathered by investigators showed that the two women prepared extensively. They purchased a large amount of weapons and tools, including guns, stun guns, a sword, a hammer, a crossbow, a throat cutter, a knife, and a baton, and researched online how to commit murder and strangle someone. Prosecutors presented digital searches on topics from murder techniques to deadly substances, suggesting premeditation rather than mere passion or heat of the moment. Neatly written notes and preparations left at the scene further demonstrated the extent of their planning, details that would later be central in court. On the morning of the 7th of January 2009, Rosa Hill and her mother May Lee arrived at the home on Pepper Tree Lane, where Eric, his daughter, and Sally Hill lived. They had a plan, but it would quickly spiral into horror. Inside that home lived Sally Hill, the elderly grandmother and beloved matriarch, Eric Hill, her grandson, and the couple's 2-year-old daughter that was in Eric's care. When Rosa and May entered the home, according to the testimony and police evidence, they attacked Sally Hill in a brutal assault. She was tasered and strangled multiple times until she died. Investigators later found her body wrapped and placed inside a garbage can in the backyard shed. While the brutal killings was happening, the plan was to target Eric Hill. When Eric returned home later that day with his daughter, he sensed something was wrong and began searching the house. That's when he encountered Rosa and May. According to Eric's testimony, the women attacked him with stun guns and a baton, repeatedly hitting him and trying to subdue. Despite the ferocity of the assault, Eric fought back and survived. He was wounded and taken to the hospital while police were alerted. with neighbors calling 911 after hearing noises and concerns over what was happening inside. Authorities quickly surrounded the home and arrested both Rosa and May. The couple's daughter, the supposed focal point of Operation Custody, was there during the attack, but was not harmed physically. After the arrests, she was placed in a temporary foster home for safety. Once police took control of the scene, the scope of what had occurred became clear. They found Selma Hill's body in the shed, showing signs of extreme force and fatal trauma. Weapons and tools linked to the attack inside the home. Internet searches history on the woman's computer detailing how to get away with murder, strangulation techniques, and weapon use. Written plans and notes suggesting premeditation. Investigators concluded that this assault was not a spontaneous act caused by passion, but rather a planned attack with tools, preparation, and intent to hurt and disadvantage Eric Hill, and ultimately to take custody of their child. The case went to trial in Alameda County Superior Court in 2011. Prosecutors presented a detailed picture of calculated planning, violent actions, and premeditated attempt to murder both Sally and Eric. Juries found Rosa Hill and May Lee guilty of first-degree murder in Sally Hill's death and premeditated attempts to murder Eric Hill. May Lee also faced a burglary conviction for breaking into the home to commit these acts. At sentencing, the judge called the crimes one of the most vicious, callous, and premeditated he had seen in his decades on the bench. Rosa received a 36 years to life sentence and May received 25 years to life. Both women remain incarcerated, serving their sentences for their roles in the deadly scheme. The fallout from this crime was profound. Selma, a beloved grandmother, was killed in a way that stunned friends and neighbors. Eric Hill survived a violent attack and was left with physical wounds and emotional trauma as a single father trying to rebuild his life. The couple's daughter, once central to the custody dispute, was thrust into a world of legal battles, foster care, and the long shadow of her mother's actions. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, and observers alike have remarked on the unusual and disturbing nature of this crime. A plan dubbed Operation Custody, complete with weapons, search histories, and written notes, all meant to engineer a scenario where one parent could regain custody throughout violence rather than negotiation. The case has since been featured in true crime documentaries and discussions about how far parental desperation can go and how the legal system and human relationships can be pushed to breaking point. At its core, this is a story about how a custody dispute, something millions of families struggle with in painful but lawful ways every year, turned into an act of extreme violence that took a life and changed many others forever. It's a reminder that when fear, resentment, and extreme actions collide, the consequences can be devastating. Thank you so much for listening to today's story, and until next time, stay safe.